What's going on, everyone? This is Sammy from the Burton Method. I'll be seeing you in a few hours, and we'll be going over flaw questions this evening. And so I figured I would give you a little bit of a leg up by doing a flaw question right now. So, on logical reasoning on the LSAT, we always start by reading the question stem first, which is this bit right here. Here it says the historian's argument is most vulnerable to criticism on the grounds that it blanks. Whenever we see that phrase most vulnerable to criticism, that's how you know it's a flaw question. Now, what do we do on flaw questions? We essentially point out something that's wrong or bad with this argument up here. So what we do now is we read it with a really critical eye, trying to understand why the premises or facts that the author gives don't necessarily lead to the conclusion that the author draws. So let's do this one together. The historian says, in the 14th and 15th centuries, the Swahili civilization of East Africa built tombs with large pillars and paneled facades. Okay, so just imagine in the 14th and 15th centuries, so, several hundred years ago, there's this Swahili civilization in East Africa, so imagine in the east part of Africa, and they were building tombs with these really kind of detailed, ornate, intricate facades and pillars. Such structures, so these tombs, are widespread among the Oromo people of Somalia and Kenya. Okay, so they're giving us more information here. We can kind of try to think about how it connects back. Why are they mentioning the Oromo people? Oh, if they're of Somalia and Kenya, so, that I guess means that they're in East Africa. Maybe they're part of the Swahili civilization. Maybe they're a different people. Unclear, but just sort of, getting the wheels turning. So these structures are widespread among the Oromo people of Somalia and Kenya, but are unknown among any other people with whom the Swahili civilization had contact. Okay, so first of all, it seems like the Swahili civilization is a different people than the Oromo civilization. And it's saying that the Swahili had these structures and the Oromo also had these structures, but no one else really had these structures. And then let's see what they conclude. So as of now, seems fine. I mean, they're just giving us information. They're just telling us facts. So there's nothing really for us to refute. But now let's see what they're trying to conclude on the basis of these facts. It's probably going to be something bad because we know it's a flawed argument. This indicates, so that's their way of saying, I conclude, I think that Swahili culture was, to some extent, influenced by Oromo culture. There it is. What's wrong here? Think about it for a sec. We know that the Swahili people did this thing, built this stuff. We also know that the Oromo people did. Why are they saying that one caused the other, right? Why are they saying that Swahili culture was influenced by Oromo culture and not vice versa? So that's what your brain should be doing. Your brain should be thinking about, they can't necessarily conclude this on the basis of the information given, right? On the basis of this information, it could be just as, reasonable of an opinion that maybe Oromo culture was influenced by Swahili culture, right? We would need more information. We would need to know maybe which came first, who started it, all of those sorts of things. And they don't give us that information. So that's what we've identified as the flaw. Now let's go to the answer choices. So A says, fails to address adequately the possibility that the Oromo people did not use the structures as tombs. We don't care about what they were or were not using them as. The flaw that we're trying to find is that they are sort of, jumping to this conclusion that one culture caused the other to have this and not vice versa. B says conclude simply because one event occurred earlier than another event, that the first event. No, they're not saying something happened before another. They're just, in the 14th and 15th centuries, but they're not saying something happened in the 14th and another thing happened in the 15th. They're kind of just, bringing up time, but they're not saying that one thing happened in an earlier, year than another. C says draws a restricted conclusion from premises that provide strong support for a much broader conclusion. Seems like a vague answer choice that's just not really relevant to what we're talking about. We don't want them to draw a broader conclusion. We just think that they should maybe draw a different conclusion, namely that it could be, maybe one influenced the other, but yeah. D says, takes for granted that there was no third civilization responsible for creating the first tombs of the kind found in both the Oromo and Swahili cultures. This one seems really good at first because, yeah, what if a third culture, right? What if there was a third culture that created these tombs well before the Swahili and Oromo culture? That would hurt this argument. But we're looking for a flaw in the historian's argument, and they don't take for granted that there was no third civilization. They don't really bring that up. They don't really bring that in. Then we go to E, takes for granted that the Oromo people began constructing tombs with large pillars and paneled facades earlier than the Swahili civilization did. That's what we're looking for. We're looking for essentially something saying that the flaw in this author's argument is thinking that the Oromo people came first, and so they influenced the Swahili culture rather than vice versa. So if E said, takes for granted the Oromo people came first, or if E said, takes for granted that the Swahili people came later, or if E said, takes for granted that the Oromo people, influenced the Swahili civilization or, sort of had an influence on them, any of those phrasings, we could choose E, right? Because E, all we need the right answer to say is something along these general lines of the authors assuming that the Oromo influenced the Swahili when it just as easily could have been the other way around. So let's see. There it is. I will see all of you later. Thanks for tuning in, and wait because we will be going over some really great questions.